They were here one moment and gone the next. No final words or goodbyes, just an unanswered phone, or a car with the keys still in the ignition, or a trail of blood maybe that led nowhere. And these aren't just cold cases. No, these are the ones that'll stick with you no matter how hard you try to shake them. So welcome to Scary Mysteries. Here are the creepiest cold cases ever recorded. Number 5. A Killer's Trap.
If you lose a child in an accident, like a car accident or something, you can understand it. I mean, the pain and the loss is still there, but at least you know what happened.
18-year-old Sherry Yearley had just started piecing together her adult life. As a recent high school graduate, she moved into a Salem, Oregon apartment with her cousin, picked up a job at Domino's, and was carving out a future one pizza delivery at a time. And on the nation's birthday, July 4th of 1982, she was back on the grind when she had to bring a pie over to Riverhaven Drive. But the issue with that is, the home here didn't exist. It was just a dead-end road near the banks of a river. And later on that evening, an off-duty police officer driving home from the fireworks with his kids spotted a Ford Pinto sitting in the middle of that road with the engine running and headlights on. Around the car, pizza boxes were strewn across the pavement. One box had been crushed by a tire, and another held a boot print. And there was Sherry's vehicle, but she was nowhere to be found. The search that followed was frantic. Police combed the riverside, and helicopters scoured the area, and volunteers lined the banks, but there was no trace of the young girl, and it appeared like she had been kidnapped. On top of that, it had been planned from the moment that call came in for that bogus delivery. Now, witnesses described seeing a suspicious pickup truck near the scene, an older model with off-road tires and spotlights mounted on the roof. But without anything else to go on, that led to another dead end. And weeks went by, and then, in a twist nobody could explain, the case took a turn into the paranormal realm when a psychic investigator from Texas named John Ketchings woke up one night to find a ghostly figure of a young woman standing at the foot of his bed. And he didn't know why, but a few days later, a package arrived from Salem investigators, and inside, information about Sherry and her case, and Ketchings recognized her immediately from the photo.
As soon as I figured out what it was, I thought it was interesting. I thought there's perhaps some message, some reason for this to occur.
Following the visions, Ketchings traveled to Oregon. He walked the grounds where Sherry vanished, claiming to see flashes of what had happened. A green pickup truck, a man luring her from her car, a sudden violent struggle. He asked if police had a list of suspects who owned a green pickup, and when Captain Will Hingston read the names, one leapt out to him: Darrell Wilson. Now, Wilson owned a lime green truck that he suspiciously repainted brown just days after Sherry's disappearance. And he admitted knowing Sherry from a party, but gave conflicting stories about his whereabouts the night she vanished. When approached with a polygraph, he refused, but curiously, he agreed to speak with a psychic. And as soon as Ketchings arrived at Wilson's house, well, he knew he was in the right place. The home matched the ones he had seen in his visions: a white post, an open front door, the stairs just inside. Alongside Captain Hingston, they chatted for quite a bit, and Wilson never confessed to anything, but he was certainly acting cagey. As they say, actions speak louder than words, and just hours after that meeting took place, Wilson chose to unalive himself. He left no note behind, though, no sort of confession, so now police were left with a dead suspect and a dead-end case. But it wouldn't stay like that forever. Wilson, though suspicious, didn't fit the behavioral profile for an abductor. He had no violent history, and so detectives quietly reopened Sherry's file years later, wondering if they had been chasing the wrong man all along. And in 2006, a shocking break came from a very different direction. Investigators re-examining cold cases noticed alarming similarities between Sherry's disappearance and the abductions of two other women in Salem during the 1980s, Katie Redmond and Rebecca Darling. Now, both had been attacked late at night, and both left behind cars with engines running, and both bore signs of a violent struggle. And Katie's killer was already behind bars, and his name was William Smith. Smith had been questioned early in Sherry's case, but claimed he was out of state at the time. Years later, new evidence exposed this lie, though, and he had been pulled over by police in Salem hours after Sherry vanished. And cellmates of his reported that Smith had boasted about an incident involving a pizza girl, and they even managed to record some of his ramblings onto cassette tapes. And finally, in 2006, police confronted Smith again. He refused to talk until they dangled the offer of a prison transfer, and then the truth spilled out. Smith admitted he hadn't acted alone, and his accomplice, Roger Nassif, had made the fateful call to Domino's, ordering pizzas to a fake address. Their original target had been another female delivery driver who drove an orange Volkswagen, a driver they were familiar with, but fate intervened, and she wasn't working that night, and Sherry was a fill-in and sent instead. When Sherry pulled up, Smith flagged her down. As she stepped from her car, they ambushed her, dragging her into their trunk. They took her to a secluded area near Smith's parents' home, and Smith strangled her and then dumped her body into the Pudding River, the same river where he had disposed of other victims. And flooding in that area later likely washed her remains away, leaving nothing to find. And Smith knew grisly details that were never made public, like the specific pizza Sherry had been carrying, a destroyer loaded with every topping Domino's offered. And he also confirmed that a ransom call had been made to Domino's the next day demanding $50,000. Now, Roger Nassif had died in 2004, never facing justice. In 2007, Smith pleaded guilty to the murder of Sherry and received a life sentence. As for Darrell Wilson, the man whose guilt once seemed so certain, well, he's no longer considered a suspect, though it is possible he was involved somehow, though likely we'll never know to what extent. Number 4, the pond and the barrel.
The next morning, Debbie should have been at work. Debbie did not go to work. It wasn't like Debbie at all.
The day after Christmas is supposed to feel slow and sweet, full of leftovers, family, and quiet time. But for 28-year-old nurse Debbie Wolfe, December 26th of 1985 would be the last day anyone ever saw her alive. She clocked out of work at 4 p.m., smiled to her coworkers, and drove off toward her cozy cabin, nestled 7 miles outside Fayetteville, North Carolina. Nothing unusual, but by the next morning, Debbie had simply vanished. Her parents, John and Jenny, knew immediately that something wasn't right. And Debbie was the type of person who didn't just miss work. She was responsible to a fault. When she failed to show up at the hospital, her family and a friend, Kevin Gorton, drove out to her cabin to check on her. And what they found there shattered any hope that this was just a misunderstanding. Debbie's beloved dogs were unfed, whining and pacing. Her car was parked oddly, not where she normally left it. Empty beer cans littered the property, even though Debbie wasn't much of a drinker. Inside her home, it looked ransacked in a way that didn't fit her personality. Her nurse's uniform was crumpled on the kitchen floor, her purse shoved hastily under the bed. And then came something even more creepy. A message on her answering machine left earlier that day from a man claiming Debbie hadn't showed up to work for quote-unquote days. But that was a lie. Debbie had just worked the day before. When Jenny tried to report her daughter missing, authorities brushed her off, telling her she had to wait 72 hours. Precious time slipped away. It wasn't until December 31st, 5 days after she had vanished, that the Cumberland County Sheriff's Office finally opened an investigation. Bloodhounds found nothing. Police combed the area, but strangely, didn't bother to search the pond just yards away from Debbie's cabin.
I think it was mentioned that they had already looked in the pond. There was no use for us to look in the pond, so I don't think we did a dive of the pond or a complete search of the pond on that day. No, we did not.
Her mother didn't trust the authorities, who weren't acting with any sort of urgency, so she took matters into her own hands. On New Year's Day, Jenny brought in 2 civilian divers, Kevin Gordon and a trained search and rescue diver named Gordon Childress. Within minutes of slipping into the murky water, Gordon found something. 2 sets of footprints at the bottom of the pond, drag marks, and then a barrel placed on top of something. And that something was Debbie Wolf's body. Now, the police in a town like this didn't like being one-upped by some guys outside the department, but they questioned whether she was even found under the barrel. Instead of treating the scene like a potential homicide, they then treated it like an accident from the start. An autopsy confirmed Debbie hadn't been drinking or using drugs. The cause of death was ruled drowning, so case closed for the authorities, who theorized Debbie must have fallen into the pond while playing with her dogs. But nothing about that explanation sat right with those who knew her. For one, let's pretend she had accidentally drowned like that. And typically victims under these circumstances will pass away with their eyes and mouths open, arms outstretched, twisted in desperation. And Debbie's body wasn't like that. Her eyes were closed, her limbs relaxed. Her body looked suspiciously clean, as if she hadn't thrashed around in the slimy pond water at all. On top of that, Kevin and Gordon both swore Debbie had been inside that barrel. Debbie's neighbors remembered a barrel near the cabin before her disappearance, but after she vanished, the barrel vanished too. All that was left was a telltale indentation in the dirt where it had once sat. Yet investigators insisted there was never a barrel at all.
What appeared to be a barrel to some of the divers could have been the field jacket, which may have ballooned out as she was laying at that angle at the bottom of the pond.
Then months after Debbie's death, Jenny got a closer look at the clothing and belongings found on her daughter. And those clothes she wore that day didn't belong to Debbie at all. The pants were several sizes too large, and the jacket wasn't hers. The bra was 3 cup sizes too big. The shoes were 3 sizes too large. With all the strange pieces of evidence, Jenny and her family came to a grim conclusion. Debbie had been held against her will and then killed. As for who might have done it, well, Jenny had 2 suspects in mind. Both were hospital volunteers who had made Debbie uncomfortable in the weeks leading up to her death. One was a man with a long history of psychiatric issues, who had aggressively pursued Debbie, even threatening to come to her home after obtaining her phone number. The police questioned him, but he refused a polygraph and skipped town shortly after. And the second was another volunteer who had tried to start a romantic relationship with Debbie, and she had turned him down, and Jenny believes it was his voice on the eerie answering machine message that day. But again, police found no concrete evidence linking him to the crime. And so, officially, to this day, Debbie Wolf's death remains ruled as an accident. Number 3. The vanishing of Misty Copsy.
Last thing I said to her when I dropped her off, I said, "Misty, I love you." She goes, "I love you, Mommy." I said, "If you screw up," I said, you won't do anything like this again." She said, "I know, Mom."
September 17, 1992. 14-year-old Misty Copsy had been at the Puyallup Fairgrounds in Tacoma, Washington that day with her close friend, Trina Bevard. Rides got ridden, food was eaten, and Misty planned on catching the 8:40 p.m. bus home to Spanaway. When she missed it, she did what any teenager might do. She improvised. She first called her mom to check in, mentioning that she might catch a ride with an older dude she knew, an 18-year-old named Reuben Schmidt. But Misty's mother didn't like the sound of that one bit and told her daughter to find another way. It was a decision that would hang over everything that came next.
I told her I didn't want her to ride with him, to call Grandma or somebody else and call me back and let me know how she was going to get home.
Denied a ride, Misty decided she'd walk the 8 miles home. The last confirmed sighting of her was around 10 p.m., seen heading towards the westbound on-ramp of Highway 512. She never made it home.
She just looked totally distressed, like she was in trouble. She looked like she was crying.
By morning, her mother knew something was wrong and reported her missing, but the investigation didn't start in earnest for months. At first, police brushed Misty's disappearance off as a runaway case. And classmates claimed they had spoken to Misty after she had vanished. One girl even said Misty called her 2 days later, saying she was okay. And based on these shaky claims, authorities closed Misty's case and outrageously even listed her as found. The reality, though, was that this girl was still missing. Whatever precious time they had to find her alive was slipping away. Reuben Schmidt, the last person Misty tried to call for help, said he refused her ride request because he didn't have enough gas. His own roommate contradicted him, saying Reuben left right after that call ended. Where exactly he went that night, nobody knows for sure. Meanwhile, Misty's friend Trina, as it turned out, left the fairgrounds with her 23-year-old boyfriend, Michael Rayner, a man who years earlier had been accused of abducting and assaulting an 11-year-old girl at knife point. No charges had stuck, but his name was on record. And Trina later admitted that Misty didn't want anything to do with Michael, and she didn't trust him at all, and so Misty chose to stay behind and take the bus, which she missed. Rayner became a suspect for a time, but after passing a polygraph test, police ruled him out, and the attention turned back to Reuben. When pressed, he told investigators he couldn't remember what happened after Misty's phone call. He claimed he experienced blackouts and woke up the next morning at his grandmother's house, some 30 miles away. Asked point blank if he could have harmed Misty during one of those blackouts, Reuben simply said, "I don't know." His first polygraph was inconclusive, and the second one he passed, but rumors swirled. Multiple people came forward saying Reuben had made comments after Misty's disappearance, bragging that he knew where her body was buried. Specifically, on his grandmother's farm, just a few miles from where Misty's jeans and underwear would eventually be found a year later, covered in dirt and mud, but no DNA to help close the case. Meanwhile, a local man named Corey Bobber inserted himself into this story because he had a theory that Misty's disappearance wasn't random. And it was part of a serial pattern tied to two other unsolved murders, Kimberly DeLange in 1988 and Anna Chapetnoy in 1990. Both girls were teens, both were abducted and killed, and their bodies were found within 100 feet of one another. And Misty? Well, she vanished 2 years and 1 month after Anna, just as Anna had vanished 2 years and 1 month after Kimberly. Bobber was so persistent that he helped direct police to the general area where Misty's clothes were ultimately found. But today, Misty Copsy's case remains unsolved. Number 2, the Grateful Doe.
Do you recognize this face? The young man depicted here died in an automobile accident in Virginia on June 26, 1995. His first name may be Jason, but beyond that, authorities have no idea who he is or where he came from.
On June 26, 1995, on U.S. Route 58 near Emporia, Virginia, a Volkswagen Vanagon veered off the road and slammed into 2 trees. A tragic accident. Inside were 21-year-old Michael Hager, the driver, and a passenger. Neither had been wearing seatbelts and both were killed instantly. Investigators couldn't find any signs of alcohol or drugs, and there was no evidence of reckless driving or mechanical failure. The working theory was that Hager had simply fallen asleep behind the wheel. While the driver's identity was quickly confirmed, the passenger, well, he was a complete mystery. No ID or license, no trace. Just a red tie-dye Grateful Dead shirt, Levi's, and black Fila sneakers. A folded note was found nearby addressed vaguely to someone named Jason, and it read, "Jason, sorry we had to go. See you around, call me," followed by a 7-digit phone number. Caroline T. and Caroline O. Bye. And the phone number had no area code. The Carolines were never identified, and no one came forward looking for any missing person named Jason. The mystery man, then, would get the nickname Grateful Doe. He had long curly hair, dyed a reddish tone, and a star tattoo on his arm that looked like it had been done in someone's kitchen. And his teeth were in good shape, no dental work, which narrowed the search, but only slightly. He looked really like any number of kids who followed the Grateful Dead across the country. Free-spirited, rootless, young. The weird part is, no one ever came looking for him. A forensic artist put together a reconstruction of what he would have looked like. The flyers were circulated, investigators checked his fingerprints against national databases, but still, for 2 decades, Grateful Doe remained a ghost. However, the internet has its ways to do some pretty crazy things. In 2012, amateur sleuths on Reddit and Facebook began obsessing over the case. They shared the reconstructions, they scoured missing person databases. One user created a Facebook page specifically for Grateful Doe, and then a miracle of digital crowdsourcing. In early 2015, someone posted photos of a young man named Jason. He looked eerily like the facial reconstructions. He wore similar clothes and was a deadhead. And most importantly, no one had seen him since 1995. The people who posted the photos didn't remember Jason's last name. They only knew he lived in both Illinois and South Carolina. And he had told people he was planning to follow the Grateful Dead. And that clue made its way to a woman in Myrtle Beach, Jason's mother. And she hadn't seen her son since the summer of '95. He was 19 years old when he left home to chase the Dead's tour, and she never heard from him again. But she never filed a missing persons report, not because she didn't care, but because she didn't know where to start. And she said, "He was always on the move. I didn't know where to report it. He could have been anywhere." But she had tried. Lieutenant Joey Crosby of the Myrtle Beach Police confirmed it. Jason's mom attempted to report him missing back in the day, but without knowing where he disappeared, no jurisdiction would take the case. In 2015, DNA was collected from Jason's mother. The first tests were inconclusive, so they tried again. On December 9th, the results were in. Grateful Doe was Jason Patrick Callahan. 19 years old, blonde hair, brown eyes, born April 18, 1976. He was a young man who wanted to experience the world, live freely, and follow the music. And somewhere between Fairfax and Gloucester, Virginia, he caught a ride with Michael Hager. He died 2 days after the last concert, carrying 2 ticket stubs and a note that read like a goodbye. It took the persistence of strangers, random internet users, and people who never knew him to give Jason his name back. He never made it to another show, but now at least he's not just another John Doe. He's Jason, and he made it home. Number 1. Vanished in the Elkhorns.
I still look for her. I always will. Every time I'm at an airport, every time I'm at a resort, sure, I look like I'm having a good time, but I'm looking for my child.
There's a particular kind of nightmare every parent harbors deep inside. The one where your child is right there, laughing and playing, and then, in the blink of an eye, they're gone. On June 25th of 1983, that nightmare became real for the Marshall family. The 4-year-old Nylene had been enjoying an afternoon picnic with her family at a campground tucked deep within Montana's Helena National Forest. It was supposed to be a simple day of enjoying the great outdoors. At around 4 p.m., Nylene wandered just a few steps ahead with a group of other children near the beaver dams of Maupin Creek. But when the kids turned around, Eileen had vanished without a sound. A large-scale search operation kicked off immediately. The police combed through dense woods. FBI agents and members of the Marshall's Church checked every trail, every hollow, even abandoned mine shafts swallowed by the mountains. But despite the frantic search, there was no trace whatsoever. Witnesses recalled seeing a man in a jogging suit lingering nearby that day. Some even said Eileen had been spotted speaking to him. And whether this man was a harmless passerby or someone with bad intentions remains one of the case's many unanswered questions. For 2 long years, silence was all the Marshalls had, until suddenly, a creepy phone call came out of nowhere. In late November of '85, an anonymous call was placed to the National Missing and Unidentified Person System. The man on the line claimed he was the one who abducted Eileen. He didn't give any additional info. It was more of a way for him to just let the world know that she was okay. Now, normally this would be chalked up to being perhaps a prank phone call, except that a couple months later a letter arrived as well. Typewritten and detailed, the man claimed he had picked up a girl named Kay, crying by the roadside in the Elkhorn Mountains. He described taking her home and teaching her himself and raising her like his own, all while traveling with her across the United States, Canada, and even Britain. He spoke of her favorite foods, her hygiene habits, the way her teeth were coming in, details that had never been released publicly. Investigators knew whoever this was, he had information only someone deeply involved could know. But as the letters continued, the content, well, it turned darker. In one excerpt, he claimed that every morning he fed Eileen a spoonful of his semen. It was grotesque, and yet he wrote about her with a sickening tenderness, describing her laughter, her affection, and trust. "I love her," the letter read, "and I have her. I just can't let her go."
This man said he was taking good care of her, but during the same phone conversation or same letter that he would write would also make reference to things that he was having Eileen do, which would be sexual abuse.
These calls and letters trace back to Wisconsin, specifically phone booths near Edgerton and Madison, but every lead fizzled into dead ends. Whoever he was, he stayed one step ahead, using payphones and moving just fast enough to slip away before law enforcement could catch up. Over the years, sporadic tips would surface, and someone thought they saw Eileen at a restaurant in Janesville, Wisconsin. An anonymous man even claimed to have killed her and dumped her body in a sealed mine shaft. But hope, or perhaps horror, resurfaced once more in 1997. A nurse in a New Orleans hospital reported a strange encounter. A young pregnant woman, about 19 years old, checked into the ER. She called herself Helena and came with a man she called her father. The woman said she thought her birth mother's name might have been Eileen, and that she grew up abroad, yet she had no accent. When staff tried to press for information, the pair quickly disappeared into the night. So, what was that all about? And decades have passed, and those leads have dried up. So to this day, no one knows what happened to Eileen Marshall. So there were the creepiest cold cases ever recorded. That's going to wrap up today's episode. If you enjoyed it and you want more, check out another video or podcast. We have tons of content to go through, so explore at your own risk. Thanks for tuning in. Stay safe out there, and I'll see you all over in the next one.